We're going to go ahead and jump in and go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to day 2 of Carnegie Inside Out. As it was mentioned yesterday, I guess was inside and today is out. So here we are with presentations 201, what to do when the wheels fall off. I am your host, Bryson Kelly. I use the pronouns he, him, his. I'm a Slate front-end strategist, also a recovering admissions professional with a lot of presentation experience, a lot of daily visit presentations I've given in my time. I am the resilient and inclusive shepherd with the colors purple, green, and maroon. Let's go ahead and meet our presenters for the day. First, we have Haley Lewis, who's the director of College Express Strategy. She is the go-to presenter pretty much in every single job that she's had for the last 15 years. She is the confident and attentive host with the colors purple, red, and blue. And we have Eric Yeager. Eric is the project manager for College Express, has a decade of public speaking experience, is the brilliant and inquisitive speaker with the colors green, orange, and yellow. All right, before kicking it off over to Haley and Eric, I just wanted to give you a quick little snippet of what to expect today in our presentation, as well as some housekeeping items. In my short time here at Carnegie, which has been about 7 months, I have learned that we are a group of people that are pretty active in the chats, which is a beautiful thing. So continue that today, keep that energy going. We will have some interactive portions for today's presentation, and hopefully a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A. As for today's guiding lights, with our presentation, things only go wrong in a presentation as you let them. You're in control. It might just look a little bit different than you thought. So without further ado, Haley, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Bryson. I always feel like a newscaster when I say, thanks for passing it over to me. Today, I'm really excited to talk not about just presentation basics, but to really dig into, okay, it's an emergency, it's a crisis. What do I do? And how do I make sure that this presentation continues to be successful? Today's agenda, we're going to talk about a couple of points. It's going to be when your technology fails, which almost happened to me because I had to completely reset my Wi-Fi this morning. So you know what? You might get a real life preview of what's to come. 2, when you keep getting interrupted. 3, when your brain stops working. Everything's planned, everything's prepared, but your brain forgot. We're going to recap these different strategies with some base principles and takeaways, hopefully high level, quick little snippets of information you can remember when you are going off for your next meeting, and hopefully time for Q&A. What to do when technology fails. We can keep going. There are a couple of strategies to remember when your technology fails. And when I say technology fails, examples of this could be you are trying to share a video when maybe YouTube doesn't work or the sound doesn't come through. Or I know Erica shared this example. What happens when all of a sudden you aren't connected to your VPN, but you're trying to do something that requires the VPN? The important thing is know your what. What's the purpose of this piece of technology? Are you going to use this YouTube video to lighten the mood, to break things up? Maybe you do that in the way that you're speaking. Can you give high-level summaries of these things with no notes? If you're needing to use a demo, do you know it well enough that if technology completely just goes to the wayside, can you just look in your camera and say, these are the things that are important about this piece of technology? Because that's really why you're trying to use that specific thing. It's because you want to communicate, this is how easy the product is. Well, can you talk about it without showing it? That's really the benefit of being prepared in advance when technology fails, because it will fail and you have to sink or swim, hopefully swim in this case, when that happens. And also know where to go for help. So for example, you're like, oh my goodness, I just need this screenshot. Have somebody on deck ready, especially if it's a higher stakes presentation, like maybe an inside out presentation where your Wi-Fi completely just is in the garbage. You Slack Eric Yeager and you say, hey, if you need to pick this up, you might need to pick this up because my Wi-Fi is garbage. And those people really can save the day sometimes. And interaction time, going in the chat. There was a GIF or GIF, depending on your persuasion. On the past slide, who is that character? What movie is he from? What is the name of the person that he marries? Go back. That person right there. Yes, Kip. That's so funny. Okay, perfect. Eric, you're up. It's Kip. Actually, before that, it's Kip from Napoleon Dynamite, and he marries Fauna.
Thank you, Haley. So when we're talking about when things go wrong, I think one thing that we run into often is when you get interrupted. You know, you may never know when your cat is going to go and walk on your keyboard and show everybody where the sun should not shine, or you're going to have neighbor who just got a sweet new dirt bike and they want to rev that for everybody. Or maybe you got a toddler who just comes running through and they just really want to say hi. There's a lot of circumstances that will come up during a call which are trying to interrupt your attention. Don't let them. Don't acknowledge them. Don't apologize for them. A lot of times, nobody else can hear it. They're not really paying attention to it. All they know is what's happening right here. So when you have these interruptions, ignore it. Just put it aside. Don't apologize for it. Just leave it be. Sometimes, too, you're going to get interrupted. You get that passionate zealot. You got somebody who has a pressing question that they want to ask you right now, even though that's on the next slide. In those sorts of cases, it can be very helpful to go and say, hey, thanks for that question. I'm actually about to answer that. Or put it a little more positively, thank you so much for teeing that up for me. Next slide, here's the answer to your question. And then you also get that third type of person, the big fish in the little Zoom pond, who really wants to show that they are a subject matter expert on this. And they want to show that to everybody right now. That person is looking for a job. They're looking for a mission. They're looking to participate. Give them a mission and say, hey, you know what? That's a great question, Dr. So-and-so. I'm going to give you the mission of bringing that up here at the end because I think that needs to be addressed on its own and given the attention it deserves. Poll time.
All right, let's pull up this poll. Go ahead and launch, give you all some time. So select all of the ways that you have been interrupted during a meeting. Got a couple different options here and some fun ones. Really feel like I should have queued up some Jeopardy music, so that's on me as a host.
Let's watch me dance.
Yeah, go for it.
Dance moves.
Anybody want to sing the Beatles, maybe? Or Penny Lane?
Anybody want to be called on at random?
All right, we're at 45 of 52. We're getting there. We're almost there. Gonna give folks just a couple more seconds if you do want to put your answers in.
Give you all a fun fact. The hiccups are contagious. There have been outbreaks of it where it affects entire communities for days on end. It is a fascinating subject.
All right, we got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go ahead and end it and let's share those results. So coming in at 85%, we have background noise, fire alarm, construction, new dirt bike, anything like that. Then we have animal and children, very common one. My dog usually will stretch and sit right behind me on this little couch. And some good results there. The death by what ifs. Well-meaning but verbose executives coming in at 36%. Yeah, so some fun interruptions.
So it's also important to talk about what happens when your brain stops. I'm sure everybody's had this happen. You're talking, you're going through point after point, and then suddenly the words are falling out of your mouth, they're just dripping out of your ears, and you have no idea what to say. A couple of things that can be very important is to know is when you're saying and ahs and you're kind of stumbling like that, your brain is trying to catch up to your mouth. We can talk a lot faster than we can think. So a dramatic pause will make you sound insightful. It can go and it can act as a piece of punctuation and give everybody else time to marinate on your great idea. Similarly, when you're wanting people to marinate on your great idea, it can be important to repeat it. Sometimes, if you really want to deliver this well, employ the TED Talk voice. You can tell by the way I am saying this right now, it is insightful and engaging. I didn't say anything there, but because of the way that I am saying that, varying pitch, slowing down before I deliver my final point, it pulls everybody in. Additionally, you're going to see I'm moving up here right now. That is something called the embodied cognition process. Embodied cognition process, we have a body, we embody it. It helps us think. There's a process to it, embodied cognition process. So as you're moving, as you're trying to avoid stopping and having everything fall out of your head, or all your thoughts are gone now, just move a little. You can go and you can sway, you can move and deliver points here, here, and here. You can bounce your knee. There's lots of different things that you can do to go and kickstart the process. Little question for everybody. How many times did I say and ah?
Go ahead and throw those in the chat. I was counting. I don't know if anybody else was.
The question is, does it count if you said it on purpose?
I would say so. Yeah. At least I counted that.
Back in my speech and debate days, we'd have somebody in the back of the room counting out like this, and it would get in your head enough that it kind of stops you doing it after you see that, 3 or 4 times. All right, Bryson, how many times did I say and ah?
On that last slide, I only got 3 times.
That's not bad. I can live with 3.
And that counts the 2 that you said on the slide on purpose. It's pretty good.
What do these strategies have in common? And really, this is the one-liner, if you could take anything away from this presentation, is that it's important in presentations when you're moving, when you control, to maintain that control by maintaining momentum. Interruptions, when your brain stops, when technology fails, you have a choice to let that kind of stop the presentation in its tracks. You have the option to say, let me spend 15 seconds, which feels like 15 minutes, trying to get this YouTube video to work. And then everyone's sitting there twiddling their thumbs saying, oh no, this is a failure. Or you can keep the momentum going and you can say, you know what? This YouTube video is not working and you can't hear the sound, but this is what's happening. This is why, where you handle it, you let it go, it's in the past, and you keep the presentation moving. John Maxwell, he says that momentum solves 80% of your problems. Technology can sometimes feel like 80% of your problems, but momentum will solve that 80% for you.
There are ways that you can approach public speaking where you cannot lose, where at the end you can feel like, you know what? I did a good job. Despite everything that went on, I did okay because I remembered these things in mind. Some of these principles can be to keep true to yourself or to keep the client in mind or to go and have some other type of guiding light.
Expecting the unexpected. If you set up a presentation and it only works if absolutely nothing goes wrong, I recommend that you go back to the drawing board and build in a little bit of buffer. What's going to happen if something goes wrong? If you don't have a phone a friend person in your corner to help you with this piece of technology or this piece of information, maybe you should find another backup because you need to have that backup. You need to expect the unexpected, expect somebody to chime in, to have a faculty member who just asks questions that really don't fit, especially if they've been on a presentation before. Don't expect that somebody's just going to act in a completely different way. They're the same person. They're going to keep that same vibe most likely in future presentations. So expect them to interrupt you. Don't have it be a surprise later on. Have some strategies in your back pocket to make sure that you're able to handle it when the Spanish Inquisition comes. Also, Eric, as a tangent, I've never seen Monty Python, and I had to look up what this was from. And so now, for everyone's knowledge, this is from Nobody Expects the Spanish Inquisition.
One other thing to keep in mind is an ounce of preparation is going to be worth a pound of cure. And what that can look like is practice your speech, practice the important parts of your speech. Don't memorize every word, because when you go and say an A instead of a the, your brain's going to start shorting out and you're going to get lost. Practice the important things. Also, know what to cut, because sometimes, you know, you have a 45-minute meeting and you got an hour's worth of content. So it's important to know what you can cut. Also, test your AV ahead of time. Test those YouTube videos. Make sure that things can break in predictable ways and that you know where things might break. Also, know who your subject matter experts are ahead of time. If I suddenly am asked a question that I don't know about another division's product, I should be able to know, okay, here's who I can go to. Or if I don't know who I can go to, I should be able to go and say, you know what? I don't know about that. Let me check with a couple of other team members and I'll get back to you.
Props to Eric for creating this meme. I think it's absolutely hysterical. And I also think it is such a good representation of what can happen in client calls sometimes. You have an agenda, everyone's agreed to it in advance. You get on the call, and then the client says, actually, today I'm hoping that we could talk about this. And all of your well-laid plans just mean absolutely nothing. And so in these situations, which will happen, there are a lot of different avenues that our brains will try to take. One of them is to just freeze and be silent and say, well, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. Or it's to kind of abruptly steer the conversation back to where you planned on originally, which can sometimes be the right strategy, but sometimes it's important to pause, clarify, and adapt. Especially if this is a high stakes, maybe a board of trustees conversation, it's important. Pause, breathe, kind of ground yourself a little bit. And if you can quickly prioritize the important factors in the meeting. Is this about really important ROI or data? Or is this about gaining confidence of your stakeholders at the institution? Because if it's about the latter, then it might be important to ask, would you rather talk about X, Y, and Z instead of what we had originally planned? Give them the option to make that choice themselves. Identify, hey, we are shifting gears here. And this is also a way that you are maintaining control of the conversation. Even though the client brought something out of left field, you are the one giving the choice. What was it, Wheeler's Witch, or the presentation yesterday, the keynote talked about this. Don't give something or nothing. Give a choice between two things. You give the choice. Would you like to talk about what we planned on originally? Or would you like to talk about this? Because that might be the actual priority for the client in that moment. You don't know all the conversations that they've been in leading up to your presentation or to your call. So letting them adapt and having the ability to adjust with your client is going to put you in a position of being a trusted advisor. And adapting is a very powerful skill because these institutions, they matter. And they matter especially to the people that we have on our calls. Maybe you worked there for 20 years and saying, nope, I just want to talk about the data. It's, well, actually, my confidence in the process is what I want to talk about today. Being able to adapt is going to be an important skill when you're maintaining control, even if things come out of left field.
So let's talk about what happens when you're running out of time. You have an hour presentation, you are 55 minutes into it, and you got 45 slides left. This happens with probably more regularity than it should, but it's understandable because we have a lot of content that we tend to go through for some of these meetings. So sometimes it can be important as you're looking at the time to go and say, hey, quick pause here. Do you have an extra 10 minutes? I have these extra points that I want to address, but I'm going to run out of time. Do you have a couple of minutes? If they do, hey, great. Be very judicial with that time. When you say they say they have 10 minutes, you have 10 minutes, but like you're going to look a lot better if you can get it done in 8. Similarly, summarize. Go, if they don't have that extra time, summarize the following points and pair it with sharing your deck at the end or summarizing an email. Hey, here are these extra important things that I want to address. Sometimes that's the best that you have because, you know, time ran short, you had technological issues, you had a bunch of interruptions. There's a lot of reasons why you ended up here. And now is not the time for blame or for anything like that. It's to, okay, here's what I need to get done to make sure that we are ending this on as strong as a note as we started.
I'm muted, interestingly enough, because my dishwasher was going off and I wanted to keep the unexpected interruptions to a minimum, and then I forgot to unmute myself. So this is actually a perfect example to happen on this slide. What I want to talk about is how important it is to honor your nerves or own your nerves. You don't always have to announce them, but just saying to yourself, you know what? I'm a little bit nervous, but that's okay. Something could go wrong, but that's okay. Part of the reason that we did the poll earlier asking how many of these different things have happened to you, I think if I remember correctly, 85% of people have had a child or an animal interrupt them during a call. Chances are that same percentage carries over to the people that we're presenting to. We are all human. Most of us work from home. Things are going to happen, and it doesn't mean, oh my gosh, my presentation is forever ruined because something went wrong. It is okay to be nervous. It is also okay to mess up on a presentation. I didn't expect Megan Gibbs and Megan D'Alessandro to be on this call when I shared the story because they are pivotal parts of this story. But I don't know how many of you recall a company call a couple of months ago where I proudly introduced our esteemed colleague, Peter Parker, from the city of Billerica. I now know how to say that word. Do you want to know how I learned how to say that word? By saying it wrong in front of my entire company. In that moment, I laughed it off. On the inside, I was dying. But now, one, I know how to say an old town name from New England. I also have a sweatshirt with the name Billerica on it. But I also have an example of, you know what? Sometimes when you just blatantly mess up in a presentation, chances are the people around you are going to be good sport. And if you own it and you control it and you maintain the momentum in the presentation, sometimes it can humanize you and it can end up being the best part. And so with that, I do want to thank you all for joining Eric, Bryson, and I today and open up the floor for any questions. And hopefully we have answers to it, maybe halfway.
We can do this a couple different ways. So feel free to use the chat if you'd like. Even if you want to be able to raise your hand, you can do that. Haley, we do have a question from David.
How did I say Billerica? I've said it by Billerica. And for the record, I live in Southern California. I've worn this sweatshirt on several occasions and asked different people how to say it. not a single person says it correctly. So I think I really was the right one. But I got
What are some things, I started with, Eric, don't start counting for me. What are some things you all do? Cause I still get nervous when I'm presenting. What are some tips, tricks, things that you'll do before deep breaths, like the whole, how do you get the nerves out?
Superman pose. So
Yes.
stand up, arms to the side, right on your hips, head up, Superman. You're going to feel silly. Push through the silliness. Acknowledge it. You're going to be sitting there by yourself, going like this, smiling, thinking, I feel like an idiot. It's going to help. It helps breed confidence. It breeds assurity, and you will give a 10% better presentation every time. And also just acknowledge that you're feeling nervous because you care. Like if you didn't care, whatever, right? But because you care, you feel nervous.
Ashley, I was actually going to make that reference to Ted Lasso that you made in the chat. This actually happens several times in the show Ted Lasso, where different characters are nervous before something and they have different ways of amping themselves up. So just find whatever loosens you up. If it's a favorite song, if it's doing a couple of jumping jacks. Honestly, for me, I carry a lot of tension in my chest. So sometimes it helps to yell, to just actually get that physical energy out. There was another question in the chat. Yes, it was, any tips on engaging an audience that doesn't seem to want to interact with you? Yes. And the way that I have done that in the past is by asking direct questions. So if everybody has come to this call, clearly there is something that needs to be discussed, whether it's ROI, like I mentioned earlier, whether it's, for me in the College Express realm, it's ways that we generate leads. Something that I have found very helpful is to ask people some variation of what's important to you. What are you hoping to get out of this presentation today? Getting that response from a couple of people, and people might not interact. And I know Alana did talk about cultural competencies. Being from Southern California, I've learned that people in New England have different gestures, different forms of nonverbal communication. So remind yourself of that as well. But when you can directly ask someone, what are you hoping to get out of this? What's important to you? You can tie it back to an individual at different points in the presentation. You can say, just like Bryson was asking about earlier, this is how I have shown X, Y, and Z. You can start engaging with each individual who's responded. So it's much harder for them to just check out because you're actually talking about something that they brought up themselves.
One thing I'll add to that too, I'm putting on my neurodiversity and mental health ERG hat here for a second. Sometimes the way that looks, that they're not engaging with you, it may not be that they don't care what you're saying. They might just have sort of a different brain, and maybe they have to go and look off to process what you're saying, or they have difficulty with eye contact. There's other things that can be going on there too. That mean that maybe they do care, they just show it in a very different way than to what you might expect.
It's really good stuff. Thank you both for that. I think we got time for one more question. Any other questions before we end this session? All right. Well, give a huge shout out, some snaps to Eric and Haley. Next session, I believe, is going to be the main stage at 2 if you're Eastern, 11 Pacific, or if you're on Mountain Time like me, you're going to be just right at noon. So thank you all for joining this session. Hopefully you all have a good rest of your day, a good Friday, and we'll see you all soon.
Bye, everybody.